Hey guys, so today I have a pretty cool guest on with me, Shawn Head. So hey Shawn, want to introduce yourself?
Hey, yes, thank you so much for having me first off. And so my name is Shawn. I'm a professional Shakuhachi player, and I do composition and I do lecturing at colleges around the world.
Cool, and you have a YouTube channel too, right?
Yeah. That's a new thing for me. I'm starting. I'm jumping on the bandwagon a little bit late, but I'm here.
Cool. So yeah, everyone go check out Shawn's channel. I'll put a link in the description. So, how'd you first become interested in shakuhachi?
Well, it's interesting because I was actually studying music, and I was actually a professional musician before I even met the shakuhachi, so to say. And I was doing a trip to China and walking around a park in Nanjing. I met this guy who was playing in front of a park, and I just struck up a conversation with him the best I could with my terrible Chinese, and was asking him like, "这个是什么?" He's like, 这个是吧. Like, what is this thing? Oh, this is a Japanese flute. And at one point he stopped me and he's just like, you know that your Chinese kind of sucks. And I was like, oh, I know. But after that, he's just like, well, why don't you just try playing it? And I was like, really? And so I play the flute and I get some sounds out of it. And he's like, dude, you know that like, that's really hard. This is a really hard instrument to play. And I was like, no. Like, what?
So he had just handed you his shakuhachi that he was playing?
He had like 30. He had like a bunch of different flutes, like Dong Xiao and all this stuff. He was kind of one of those people who just likes to collect a bunch of different flutes and play.
And he had them all with him? He was just bringing them all to his park?
Yeah. He had like a huge cart of like flutes with him, and like music and like speakers and everything, just to go to the park to play. So it was kind of cool. But yeah, he just handed me an instrument and said, start playing. And I did. And then he was like, well, you know, you already can speak. I told him that I could speak Japanese a lot better than I could speak Chinese. And he's like, well, you should just go to Japan and go study. I was like, okay, why not? It's a good idea. And here we are.
Cool. Now, hearing that, I realized we should probably take a step back. And first of all, why don't you explain what a shakuhachi actually is in case anyone out there is unfamiliar?
So shakuhachi is a bamboo flute. It has 4 holes in the front and 1 hole in the back. It's an instrument that is very simple in design. It really is just a bamboo pole, and it's been bored out, put lacquer on the inside, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
And so it originated in Japan?
Actually, it originated in China about 2,000 years ago, and then it made its way over to Japan in the 8th century, so in the Yamato Jidai.
So that's interesting. So it's originally Chinese, but talking about it in English right now, we're referring to it as a shakuhachi, which is a Japanese word. So what's the deal with that?
So actually, the chiba, or my pronunciation for Chinese is probably wrong, but the chiba is actually no longer a thing in China. So it's actually weird to associate it with China, seeing that it doesn't even have a place in the culture anymore. It's just a thing of the past. But the version that we have today has actually changed from its original Chinese version. So it is its own individual instrument now.
Oh, cool. Yeah, there's a few things like that. Like also Zen is coming to mind, where Zen originally comes from China, right? In China it's called Chan. But in the West, where we tend to call it Zen, which is the Japanese word for it. Or
Correct.
Go, right? The game Go. And all the terminology. I think originally Go comes from China, but in the West, we normally use the Japanese words when talking about the game and the strategies and stuff. So interesting how that works out. I guess it has to do more with how it got to the West. If it came mostly from Japan to the West, then even if it's originally Chinese, we'll end up using the Japanese words for it.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. It's the same thing with some of the words that Japanese use. So instead of saying like they don't say part, like how we would say part-time job, they use the German word Arbeiten or Baito. So it just all depends on where they learn it first. And I think it's the same thing for sushi. Like sushi is actually a Southern Chinese thing, from what I understand, but it's much more affluent or much more popular and well known in Japan. And so when it came here, we just call it sushi.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I didn't know that. So cool. Well, now going back to your personal narrative. So I guess I had kind of just assumed that you first got interested in shakuhachi, and then that's what brought you to learning Japanese and things like this, but you just mentioned that you already knew Japanese pretty well before you even became interested in shakuhachi. So rewinding back, how did you first of all end up in China, and how did you end up knowing Japanese?
So we'll go with the Japanese thing first, and Chinese thing as well. It's actually really kind of a lot of Asian culture that I've just been really interested in since I was a young kid. I remember being like 3 or 4 years old, and my mom was driving me somewhere, and I remember that there was this big billboard and that it had like a bunch of Chinese characters on it. And like for me, like it was just like the coolest thing, and like I was almost like awestruck with like how beautiful it was. And I asked my mom what it was, and she's just like, I don't know, just some sort of Asian. I'm like, oh my God, of course, like an answer that's so not specific whatsoever. But I later came to find out that it was Chinese, and I had been searching around for things because I knew that I liked like some things about Japanese culture. I was really interested in samurai. I loved samurai films, even from a very young age. I loved martial arts. So I knew that I wanted to study the language at some point. And I did get a chance to study the language starting from middle school. We actually had a program in Franklin, Wisconsin, of all places. But when we had like exchange students from Japan that would come over and everything. So we never really got to an extraordinarily high level there, but we were able to do very basic conversation. So by the time I got into college, I would continue to develop my own skills, studying my kanji myself, watching Japanese TV, talking with friends, doing anything I could to get a little bit better. And so then by the time I was in China and whatever, I had somewhat of a level that was fairly basic enough to get around. Now, for China, how did I end up there and not in Japan first? The girl that I was dating in college was Chinese, and she's like, well, why don't you come to China for the summer and meet my parents? I was like, China sounds so cool. Meeting your parents, not so cool. But I made it over there. We met the parents. They didn't like me. But that's how I ended up there.
Cool. And so you just spent one summer in China?
Correct.
And then did you go straight to Japan after that? Or did you have to go back and finish school, or?
Well, I went back, and then I started actually teaching myself things because I had a basic understanding of Japanese, so I could open up a book and make out, okay, this is what I need to do here. So I kind of did the DIY version of teaching myself shakuhachi the best that I could.
Using a Japanese book?
Using a Japanese book, yeah.
And where did you even get that Japanese book?
I ordered it online. I actually had my friend buy it for me, and then it went to their house on Amazon, and then they shipped it to me into Cleveland, Ohio, where I was studying classical music.
Oh, wow. So, and now I'm really curious about this. So was there any resources you can find in English, or really not at all?
They were, but you have to remember I was a college student, and all those books were really expensive. So it was either going to be the 1,000 yen book or like the $50 book in America. And I was definitely not going to pay $50 for a book for basic information. So I did do like a lot of like internet research, and I found stuff like that. And then I decided like, well, I might as well like use this as an opportunity to get my Japanese better as well. So I'll buy the introduction book. And there was like a lot of words in there. Like I had no idea what they meant because they're specifically related to shakuhachi. So there's like a lot of things I'm like, what the heck does this even mean? And then I had to, do a lot of research to find out what it meant. But that's where it comes next, is that I actually started writing letters to Tokyo Geidai and Tokyo Ondai. And those are the two biggest music colleges that have traditional music sections. And I wanted to find a shakuhachi teacher. And that's actually how I found my first teacher that I was able to study online with before even going to Japan. So
talk more about that. What did you get a lot of responses back from the colleges that you contacted, or was this like the only one?
I got one response back. And then they said that I should study with this guy. And then they said that he's at the Tokyo Ondai. So I sent him another letter. And then I actually found his website. So then I just reached out to him by email. And then we got connected that way. And I started taking lessons.
So was that kind of like over Skype, basically, at first?
All over Skype.
And does this teacher speak any English? Or was it all in Japanese?
He did speak English. Or he does. He's still living. He does speak English. He speaks fairly good English, but I requested that everything was going to be in Japanese.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about this teacher. Like, had he taught foreign students before? Like, what's his background?
Yeah, so my first teacher was Kaoru Kakizakai, and he actually has a lot of foreign students, and he has quite a big program, and he's very well known around the world as a shakuhachi player. And in my opinion, he's one of the top ranking players for sure. So he's no stranger to teaching online and no stranger to teaching foreigners either.
Oh, cool. So is he kind of like the go-to guy if you want to learn shakuhachi and you don't speak or you're not actually ethnically Japanese, or at least that was at the time?
I think that it really depends on what you're looking for, because he specializes in like watazumi or Katsuya Yokoyama style playing, which was he was a ningen kokuho or living national treasure for shakuhachi. So he kind of has that relationship. So if you want to learn that sort of style of playing, then he's definitely one of those go-to people. But there are actually a lot of players that are teaching online. So he's not necessarily the go-to, but I would definitely say that he's highly sought after.
Oh, cool, cool. So when you first got into shakuhachi and you started to get more serious about it, were you thinking that maybe you wanted to make the rest of your life kind of revolve around this and really pursue it as much as possible? Or were you just like, well, I've taken the first step. This is pretty cool so far, so I'm just going to take the second step and see what happens?
Well, actually, not at all. It was not the plan at whatsoever. My plan was that I was going to stay in music school and I was going to go all the way to the doctorate level and get my doctorate in composition, and I was going to go find a position at a college to teach music composition. And shakuhachi was just that extra fun thing that I was going to do. It was going to be my hobby, and it was going to help inspire and be some of the DNA, the fundamental components to my compositional works. But so the funny story that happened is that Nichibei Kyokai, the Japan America Society of Dublin, and I say Dublin and not the state because I thought it was of Scotland, and I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to Scotland, but it's Dublin, Ohio. So a little bit of a letdown there, but they called me to come out and do a performance. And I said, at first I told them, I'm not really a performer. I don't want to do that. I'm just using shakuhachi as my intellectual thingy that helps inspire me for music. And like the current me right now is like, I would have beat that kid up. I'm like, take the job. They're going to pay you. And then that's when they said, oh, that's too bad. We were going to pay. And I'm like, when do you need me there? And so then I showed up, I played. And then once I was done playing, I was like, oh, that was fun. That was a cool experience. Then I started getting phone calls of like, hey, you were the shakuhachi guy, right? I'm like, yeah, how did you get my number? Oh, I got it from the Japan America Society. We'd love to have you come out and play. And I was like, maybe I can do something with this. And that's when I decided, like, I had been taking all these lessons. I was like talking to my teacher, like, should I try to get like the degrees and stuff? And he's like, you can. And so then I did.
And how long had you been playing shakuhachi at that point?
That was about 5 years.
Cool, cool. So I'm also curious what your full background in music was. Like, what instruments were you planning on pursuing or working with mainly before you got into shakuhachi, and just how long had you been doing music total?
Well, I had a semi-pro career as a violist. I say semi-pro because I wasn't full-time because I was still in college, but I worked with operas, I worked with chamber music, full symphony orchestras, and the whole 9 yards. I even taught a year at a high school orchestra. So, but viola was my main instrument. And then I got a lot of jobs doing compositional work. So writing scores for sometimes animations, for film scores as well, and then large chamber ensembles and contemporary music.
Oh, cool, cool. So having such an extensive background in that type of music, what was it like getting to shakuhachi? Like, how much of it carried over and how much was totally different?
So much of it carried over, especially as a contemporary musician. We do our best to train ourselves to have perfect pitch. And basically that's what I aim to do. And I'm pretty close that anytime someone plays a note, I like 9 times out of 10, I know exactly what they're playing. So that not having to learn that shaves off like 7 years of shakuhachi life of just learning how to play in tune. And I already knew how to practice because I've been doing it for years. So I know how to go about learning an instrument. And so that also shaved off a lot of time and a lot of things, a lot of lessons I did not need to take because I already did it. And so that's why I think that my process for learning shakuhachi went so quickly, is because I already had the know-how to learn an instrument. Just like, I think like polyglots are the same way. Like after you learn 5 languages, learning what's one more?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it sounds like that would be the perfect metaphor. So did your teacher love you? Were you like his best student ever?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I know that we still talk on the phone like once a month. So I guess he likes me. I hope he likes me.
So after you started getting to Shakuhachi and, you started to consider it as a more viable career choice, then how did things unfold from that point? When did you go to Japan and start practicing more intensely?
So I had already been going to Japan back and forth every single year, sometimes twice a year, to study actually in a temple. Because what I knew that I was missing was the spiritual side of things. So understanding what all of these Buddhist concepts mean, but not just from reading it from a book, but actually experiencing it. So going and staying at a temple for a week or two, waking up every single day at 4 a.m. to do okyo, and then do soji zen, and then kihin, and then zazen, and then odaiko, and all these sort of things. A part of that was a big part of my shakuhachi training and just historical training for the relationship between shakuhachi and Buddhism. But in terms of actually the career path, how that developed was basically the first year I got out of college, I took a job as an orchestra director, and because I really wanted to work and I really wanted to have something that was stable right away. So I basically saved up all of my money. I took I actually had a lot of students too. I was teaching like 45 or 50 private violin students. So I was working about 110 hours a week. And I saved up all my money. I said, I'm going to do a tour through Japan. I'm going to go through Chiba. I'm going to go through Tokyo. I'm going to go through parts of even as far as Hachioji. I'm going to go down to Yokohama, and I'm going to do these performances. And I'm going to see what people think. And I'm going to see if I actually like this life. So I did that. I funded my entire first Japan tour, and then from there I used that material to go out to other organizations and say, yeah, I'm an international soloist, because I'm not wrong. I've soloed in both America and I've soloed in Japan, and to have that title and to have that proof there, I think there's a little bit more of like a willingness to work with you, and there's a little bit more like grandioseness to the person. So they're like, yeah, sure, we'd love to have you come and play. And then it just kept doing like that. Lots and lots of networking, countless hours writing emails and making phone calls, doing collaborations with people. You name it. I've probably tried it.
So two things that I want to ask you based off what you just said. First, what is the relationship between Buddhism and Shakuhachi? Because I didn't know there was any connection between those two.
So it actually, the sect that it comes from is called Fukeshu. It's a very small sect of Buddhism, and some people say that it's derived from the Rinzai sect of Zen Buddhism, and other people say that there's no connection whatsoever. It's kind of like murky waters there, but it does have that relationship there. And my opinion is that the idea of playing shakuhachi was a replacement for doing like shinkan taza or zazen and other sorts of like spiritual practices.
That's pretty interesting. So could you talk a little bit more about that? How does that work? How does shakuhachi function as a spiritual practice?
So that's a really great question, which actually a lot of people are still trying to figure out. We're not really sure, because this Fuke sect no longer exists, first off, and two, it was actually a fake religion. It wasn't even a real one. It was one that was cultivated by these people who wanted to have special access to go throughout Japan. Supposedly, all this is supposedly, or allegedly rather, if we're going to use the legal terms. And actually, they made a pact with the shogunate government, and they said, "Oh, well, if we're going to give you this special rights to travel throughout Japan, we want to be able to put our samurai within your group and go and travel to other places." So it actually became like a sort of cult of assassins to go to different places and kill people. And they actually, according to legend, everything's just according to legend, they also used to use their shakuhachi to beat people up too.
Okay, that sounds pretty intense. And like, what part of history, what time period?
This is Edo.
Is that supposedly? Okay, cool. So not too old.
It's not too old. What we do, like a lot of the stuff like this doesn't have really good record keeping in Japan. So like we know that these monks were real. We know that they existed. We have the music. We have instruments from that time. We even have people who were like ex-samurai who started schools to teach shakuhachi. We just don't know the nitty gritty details. We just have like kind of the big picture.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So, what was your experience going and staying at those temples? And because you said that they also do traditional meditation, right? Zazen. So, what is that like?
Like my experience doing zazen at a temple.
Yeah, like, do you feel like shakuhachi has informed spirituality in your personal life?
I would say overall yes, because it is like it's just something that resonates with you to the core, and like the music speaks something so profound and deep that like you can't get away from it. It's not something you can necessarily put your finger on and be like, oh, this is what they're talking about. It's like a, I don't know. Have you ever had like you go somewhere and you just have like that spiritual moment, or that like something, this place means something important, but you don't really know why? That's kind
Yeah.
of what shakuhachi is, in just a musical format of that.
And so, do you feel like this is something that you didn't feel with Western music?
Oh, 100%, absolutely. I mean, I love Western music. I mean, Bach's like chorales and all of his religious and liturgical music, fantastic. I just never felt as like, it's like, I mean, it's like getting hit by a train full speed when I hear shakuhachi.
And I mean, I know this is probably an impossible question, but do you have any hypotheses as to why that is? Like, what is it about that shakuhachi music that is lacking or that you don't find in the Western music?
The shakuhachi is so much like the voice. It sounds like monks chanting. It sounds like shomyo, which is Buddhist liturgical chanting, which is also a very old and not really widely practiced art form in Japan either. So, but that, because it sounds so much like the human voice, and both in that chanting style and like a folk singing style, and it also has a lot of elements of nature, like running water. You can hear those sounds, like the sound of the stream. You can hear the sound of the wind rushing through the bamboo groves. You can hear the sounds of cranes and birds. Like all of that, just like it's real. It's a real thing that's like untouched by humans, right? It's not a, it's a nature thing, like, right? It's so natural, and that's, I think, what the connection is.
Oh, that's really fascinating. That makes me want to go listen more carefully to some shakuhachi music. So that's cool. Well, jumping back to your personal narrative, sorry if anyone listening that it's hard to follow because I'm jumping around so much. But so when you went to Japan and you said you kind of did this tour across all of the country. So what was that like? How were you actually setting up these gigs and what did that look like on a more concrete level?
It was not easy at all. I had to do a lot of phone calls to these organizations and these companies, and some of them were like, I can't remember what the website is called, but it's basically like an Airbnb, but for renting out spaces for musicians, like to do performances. So I called like 6 or 7 places, and some of them were actually kominkas, which are the old Japanese homes, and I did the concerts in there, like the main living space with on the tatami mats. And so I just made the calls and, chopped through my Japanese as best as I could, saying that I wanted to rent out the place and how much it would be, and all that kind of stuff. And then I tried to find places that were far enough from each other, but not so out of the way for where I knew most of my friends were living, because I did want my friends to show up and support. Because my biggest fear was, what if nobody comes? Because like no one knows who like this random white boy is who's playing shakuhachi. So if I could have my friends show up, then I at least could have my friends say to their friends that, oh, I'm going to this concert. But I was actually really impressed that a lot of people came. Like there was people that had to stand outside for some of the concerts.
And how were these people learning about that this shakuhachi show was happening?
That's where I asked the places, the different places that I was renting out. I said, do you guys have anything where you promote what events that are happening at your location? And they said, yes, we do. We put it on our website and things like that. So they were actually posting and helping me out that way. So I was actually really fortunate that all these places did get involved, and it wasn't just, thank you for your money, good luck.
Oh, cool, cool. So you said you had to rent out the space, and then did you make some money back for the ticket sales?
The first concerts that I did not charge. I wanted them to be free because I wanted to make sure that people came. And I also had review slips, so I wanted people to write what they actually thought, and they were all anonymous, so that they could say whatever they want. And it's not like I could get their handwriting and be like, oh, this is Yamamoto-san, I know him, I'm gonna have a talk with him later. Everybody felt comfortable to say what they actually wanted or what they actually thought of it. And then at the end, I said, out of 100%, what would you say, and things like that. So there was a part of that I was really looking for, like, honest feedback on what my playing was like. What did people really think about it? And especially, what did Japanese people think about it? Because that's always the question I get when I do some sort of performance in America, is they say, what do Japanese people think about your playing?
And what do they think about it?
I knew you were going to ask that. So overall, Japanese people are really do like my playing. When I went through all the sheets, the lowest score that I got was an 85%. But the general scores that I have are like 90 to 100, and then some people were really nice and they were like 150%. I want to see it again, and that kind of stuff.
Cool. So as far as my understanding goes, shakuhachi isn't very popular in Japan right now. Like, probably not very many Japanese people that are, in middle school, high school, college age are thinking that they want to start up shakuhachi. And so for these people that were coming to see you, was it kind of like the wow factor of, oh, there's this foreigner who does this traditional Japanese thing that we don't even do that much? Or was it more like there was a small dedicated shakuhachi community and they were like, oh, we got to check this out?
I think that it was more the fact of, there's this guy from America who's going to be playing shakuhachi, and he's really young, and he has a shihan attached to his name, or he has like a teaching license attached to his name. And I think a lot of them are like, okay, foreigner shihan, I think I got to hear that. And actually, one of the kominkas, the owners of it, he actually wrote an article about it, saying like that he was really skeptical about even having me come. He's like, what if he's like really bad, and then I have to sit there and listen to an hour and a half of really bad shakuhachi music? But then he like said, but then as soon as I heard the first note, like, I knew, oh yeah, so that's the sound of a shihan for sure. So yeah, I don't know if I really answered your question or if I just kind of went off onto another tangent.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, so can you speak a little bit to the popularity of shakuhachi in Japan right now? And like, out of all those people that would come to see you in the audience, how many of them had even heard live shakuhachi music before that?
Yeah, so I ask that question a lot when I do the concerts, especially when I go to Japan. And I specifically ask, nama de kita koto arimasu ka? If you've ever heard it in person. And most people, I would probably say 95% of them have never heard it in person. And so that and this is people in Tokyo and people in Chiba and people in Yokohama and so on. It really is not widely practiced. And I think the numbers right now of like actual people that are living in Japan at this moment that have a master's degree in shakuhachi is like 1,500 people.
Wow. So yeah, that's kind of like a double wow factor, right? The first one, just no one had, a lot of these people, they had never seen a live shakuhachi performance before. Plus, it's a foreigner, which, is kind of a big deal in Japan.
Oh, absolutely.
And so you mentioned this word shihan, sorry. Mm-hmm. Can you speak a little bit more to what that actually is and what it means?
Yeah, so shihan is a traditional system. It's a shihan-deshi relationship, so basically student-master. In that sort of thing, it's kind of like... basically you would live with your teacher and you would study with them and that kind of stuff. But shihan really just it's an older word for a person who is able to teach students. And it doesn't have anything to do, or there's no correlation with actually level of playing or mastery of an instrument. It just means you know the amount of material required to teach.
And how do you get this,
Lots of lessons and lots of practice. So you have to learn a set number of pieces that's designed by your teacher. So in my case, it was about 40 traditional honkyoku works, which is the traditional music that these Komuso monks were playing. And then you have to learn a set of usually 40 to 60 sankyoku pieces, which is ensemble music from Edo Jidai. And that's koto, shamisen, and shakuhachi. It used to be the kokyu, which is a type of arhu from Japan. But then it got replaced to shakuhachi. And then you learn folk music and minyo, minyo folk music, and also lullabies, and then contemporary music, and whatever else that your teacher requires you to do.
Wait, you mentioned a few other instruments there. So are you actually playing those other instruments, or you're playing their melody on shakuhachi?
God, no. I could never do those instruments. That's a whole other skill set that I just do not have. Those other instruments are the popular instruments to collaborate with shakuhachi. So most ensemble music that shakuhachi players perform are going to be with koto. And if
I
there
see.
isn't, if
I
there's
see.
another person there, it will be koto and shamisen. So in that case, you'd have to learn those your part for the ensemble.
Okay, okay. You're not learning their part. I see.
Yeah, but and other art forms, like if you were going to learn gagaku, which is the old imperial court music, if you wanted to have like a certification in that or like go to school for that, you would have to learn all of the instruments, all of the dance, all of the songs, and like some other stuff too. Like it's intense.
Dang. And so for this shihan, was this something that you received from that original teacher that you started video calls with in the US?
Yes, correct. Actually, the second teacher that I had, the second teacher I had actually had studied with another really amazing teacher, Taniguchi Yoshinobu, and through him, I was able to do the system, which starts Shoden, Chuden, Okuden, Junshihan, Shihan.
Okay, and so was this before you came to Japan?
That was after I had come to Japan.
Okay, so walk me through your kind of history, like year by year. So you started Shihan in the US and you were doing the Skype calls, and then like what did it look like year by year?
Okay, so the first year that I started, I was studying with my first teacher, and every week, sometimes 2 times a week, I would have a lesson with him. Then in the winter, during winter break, I went to Japan to go study at the temple and to work on my Japanese language skills and just meet people and meet my friends and all that kind of stuff. The next year, I switched teachers, and then I started studying more intensely, doing the same thing. Actually, I think I started that in the summer. So summer before the school year had started. And then I was studying with him every single week, and then I continued with him for an additional 5 years. So then every single year, basically, the music just got more difficult, and I kept the same process of going to Japan, doing temple study, doing whatever I could to learn more about traditional Japanese arts, going to a lot of the different like musical events that were happening. And then at the end of year 4 with my teacher, that's when I received the shihan. So as you go along, like as you learn these pieces, your teacher will give you the degree at the end of completing the set number of pieces required for each level.
I see. And so it was after you received the shihan that you went to Japan and started your tour there?
Correct. That's correct.
And so then after that point, walk me through the rest of how everything played out up until the present.
So after I did that tour, I came back. I quit my job as a high school teacher. I cut out half of my violin students and viola students, and then I just started performing. I created a group called the Shoso Duo, which is myself and a harpist named Susanna Campbell. And the name Shoso actually comes from Shoso-in, which is a famous temple in Nara that actually it's a kura, which is a storage facility that actually holds one of the oldest known shakuhachi there. So it's kind of like a homage sort of thing. And then we together started performing and around the Texas area, where I currently live. And I started picking up shakuhachi students at the same time. Then after that, I started contacting colleges around the United States, and I started commissioning composers. And so through commissioning the composers, I was able to travel to Taiwan, to China, to London. I was able to travel throughout many, many states in the United States, and also lecture at the corresponding colleges of those professors if they had a relationship or a student, because I also held a composition competition where people could submit music, and then if they won, I would commission them to write me a piece for shakuhachi. Outside of that, I started working with video game companies to record music, like background music for with the composer, also things for films, and then I also do things for like even hip hop.
Oh, cool. So what are some video games or movies that some of the audience might have heard of that you played some shakuhachi for?
I think, okay, so Crusaders, I can talk about. That one I'm allowed to talk about. So that is the new Crusaders game, which is the Stronghold. It's Firefly. The shakuhachi music on that is me playing. And then the other ones haven't even been released the name yet, so I actually can't talk about them.
Oh, cool. And so how long did you actually spend living in Japan full time? Like just about a year or?
I wouldn't even say that because I had to be in college. So it was basically as much as I could get away. The longest that I could be there was a month and a half. And then the shortest time I was there for like 2 weeks. But again, it was just going every single year, whether it be once or whether it be twice a year. But with the
I see.
full-time college, it was just impossible.
Okay, so when you did that tour across Japan, that was like a month long thing or a month and a half long thing?
That was a month and a half.
Okay, cool. So, oh, I didn't know that. So you've never really like lived in Japan full time.
No, I've never
That's
had
pretty cool.
never had the opportunity to do so because well, first off with the school, and then the second off was with work. But now that I'm more established and I don't have a regular job. I just do shakuhachi stuff. Now that's like my plan is to move and go do that in Japan full time, because it's I've done the thing in America and I'm really happy with it. I like it a lot, but I want to expand and give it a shot in Asia, see how that goes.
Cool, cool. Oh, so this is pretty interesting because that's something that we kind of have in common where I have lived in Japan. I've spent 6 months in high school living in Japan full time with the host family and stuff. But besides that, I have been in the US the whole time. So most of my time learning Japanese and reaching the level I'm at now was done while living in the United States through the internet, through interacting with Japanese people and Japanese media, largely through the internet. And so it sounds like you basically did the same thing with Shakuhachi and the Japanese language, right? Like you learned
Exactly.
Shakuhachi through the internet, which is pretty incredible, right? Like even for someone like me who learned Japanese on the internet, it seems like, oh, well, if you're a professional player, you must have gone to Japan and lived with a Japanese teacher or something like that. But I guess that isn't true at all.
And I don't think it's necessary. It doesn't. It's not necessary. You don't have to go to Japan to learn Japanese. You don't have to go to Japan to learn the arts. Like the world is so globalized now that we can do that from the comfort of our homes. It just depends on like your individual, like how what is the word I'm looking for? Discipline, your own discipline. So for the case of you, being able to sit at home and lock everything out and just focus on Japanese for that, there's very few people that could actually successfully do that for the length of time that you did. And I think it's the same for me. Like, not everybody's meant to be a musician, and because musician takes like 4 hours, 5 hours every single day of practice, and then in addition to that, the study part of it. And for me, making it even more difficult is that a lot of times the study I have to do is in a second language, which at that time I really wasn't that great at. So there was a lot of like dictionary, book, dictionary, book, dictionary, book. Okay, now let's look at the sentence. Oh, this is what they mean. So reading a book would take me 10 times longer than, somebody who is native in Japanese.
Yeah, that is really cool. But one thing that I'm curious about, do you feel like the fact that your lessons with your teacher were happening over Skype was limiting in any sense at all? Because I can imagine, when I'm talking to my friends over Skype, the audio quality isn't amazing. It still cuts out every now and again. And there's just sense that everything's kind of through a little bit of a fog. It's not the same as being in person. So was that a
Absolutely.
limiting factor?
If it was like if we didn't have vinyl and CD and the internet, then yeah, it would be a limiting factor because I could never hear the pure like real tone of shakuhachi. And with me having access to some of the best studios in the world and like being able to walk in there and listen on $60,000 CD or $60,000 a stereo system, you get the tone, you get the idea of that. And I think that if I had not had the musical background, the musical training that I had before, there would be no way that I would be able to reach the level that I did at that time through Skype. But I also was really fortunate that I had a lot of support from Japanese people. I actually had a shakuhachi shokunin, a person who makes shakuhachi. He's been making them for now over 5 decades, became one of my sponsors and provided me with great instruments. So, also having access to that was a huge advantage. And I think the best feature about Skype that really helped is that I could record the lesson. So that way I could go back and, relive that experience. So it wasn't just like taking one lesson a week. It was like taking 20 because I would watch the lesson again and again and again and hear my mistake and then develop off of that.
Nice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so did you have to record yourself playing with better equipment and then send that over separate from the Skype lesson so that your teacher could listen more carefully to what you were playing and then give you feedback?
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. So I went into the studio and I would record myself, and then I would send an unedited version to him, and then he would listen to it through everything, and then he would either pass me or fail me. It wasn't like there was no other way. It's like either you know it or you don't.
Cool. So it wasn't just Skype. It was Skype plus, taking advantage of this more advanced or expensive technology to make sure that none of the audio quality was lost on either end. You could have a more full experience.
Exactly right. And of course, he had his own CDs as well that I would be listening to. And there's a lot of really great recordings online and DVDs of some of the great masters of the last generation that I had access to. And I also have vinyls from 1930 and 1940 of some of the great Shakuhachi players as well. So that kind of stuff is just invaluable. And it's not even just having those teachers too. I studied with probably one of the greatest string players of our time, and getting able to work with him and having him as my mentor, even to this day, he still mentors me. I didn't understand what color and tone meant for music until I met him, and I met him when I was 16 or 17. And so working alongside that and getting my butt kicked every single time we met to a level of you know nothing, everything that you're doing right now is hay, and you need to find a way to make this garbage hay into roses. And that having that kind of being the next level, hearing him in person, hearing his philosophy and hearing how he approaches and how he listens to music completely changed my world.
And this was a Japanese person?
No, this was actually my string professor.
I see.
Yeah.
Back when you were you were learning.
Sorry, that's confusing.
I see.
My life is very confusing. It's there's so much going on with music, but it's all intertwined and tangled. But it's a big knot of mess to try to separate and to organize.
Cool. And so I don't know if you have very much time left, but I'd love to just talk a little bit about your experience learning Japanese, because I think it's really fascinating that really you kind of killed two birds with one stone, where you were learning music and you were learning Japanese. Basically, you were learning music through learning Japanese, and you were doing both at the same time, and they probably both reinforced each other.
Absolutely.
And so what was your experience of that? I know for the first couple of years, it sounded like you were doing more traditional study, but...
Yeah, so, okay, in middle school and high school, we learned really basic stuff. It was basically just, basic sentence structures, and you wouldn't get outside of subject, object, verb, and that's it. That was big news if you could do that. And you'd learn maybe 150 to 300 kanji. After that, I did completely by myself. I hated this, the speed of it, and because I'm much more the style of person that when I have the time, I'm going to dedicate 8 hours today to do this sort of thing and just hunker down and memorize all this stuff, listen to all these things, speak to all these people and whatnot. I tried 1 year in college to take a Japanese course, and I hated it. And actually my Japanese got worse. And I that from there, I knew okay, I'm not doing this. I'm not taking a class. I don't care if I'm required to do the credit. I would rather study myself than take the test and then get approved to that. I don't remember what the thing is called, but you can take the test for level 3, and then if you pass that, then you don't have to take the course. They just automatically give you the credit. You just pay for it. So I did that instead, and after a year, I passed the there are 3 years of coursework I did in a year, but for me, the learning process was mostly verbally done, because as a musician, that's my skill, is listening and then reproducing the notes. So that's how I did it. Lots of conversation, lots of mistakes, and not feeling bad about making a mistake.
Cool. Yeah. And so how related was the Japanese learning process to the learning the music? Sounds like you were studying outside of just the music. It wasn't like the Japanese was simply a tool to decode whatever you needed to decode in the music related stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. How related and how intertwined? Well, every single time I was, playing shakuhachi, I was reading Japanese music, and so that's all done in katakana and kanji. There are some hiragana characters depending on the word that they might be using, So there's the reading aspect of that. And then when you're doing the research, I mean, all of that is in Japanese. There's very little English text. So there's that, learning all those words and learning all those grammar points and figuring out what they mean. So I think for Shakuhachi, it's more of the reading component and the comprehensive side. Whereas outside of that, if I was talking to my teacher, we'd be speaking in my first teacher, we were speaking in Japanese. And then when I went out to hang out with my friends, and even in Cleveland, I had a group of Japanese friends that I hung out with quite frequently. And so we would basically just speak as much Japanese as possible.
Oh, cool. So you were able to get a pretty good immersive environment.
Yeah. And that was the most important. And like, I didn't actually watch Western TV anyways. I wasn't really interested in it, but what I did when I became more serious, I turned off the subtitles, and then I just started watching as best as I could. And sometimes you miss a lot of really great moments in TV, but you can go back to it 4 years later and then be like, oh my god, that's like magic. I had no idea like how funny that was until I learned it. But I tried my best to do the immersion process as much as I could, being a full-time student taking 22 credits.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's what I always talk about on my channel, and that's what worked really well for me. And so are you still actively learning Japanese?
Every single day. Like, it helps to have a girlfriend who speaks Japanese and does not speak English that well. I mean, she can, but she'll probably say like 2 words in English and then it goes right back to Japanese. So that really, really helps. And I think that actually my fastest level of growth has actually been in the past 2 months, just having her here and not going out and whatever, and just speaking Japanese constantly.
Cool. And so you said you're planning to go to Japan and really just test your shakuhachi skills in the East. So what are you really thinking in terms of a kind of concrete plan? Like, what do you hope to be able to do over there?
So I actually go every single year and perform, and I collaborate with musicians. I'm just, and it's, all of them have been very successful, and I've been paid to go out to Japan. So there is they respect my playing, from at least they wouldn't show up and pay if they didn't want to listen, or they didn't like it, or they wouldn't return again to watch me the next year. So what I want to do is I want to double down, and I want to see, okay, I'm going to try to teach shakuhachi in Japan to Japanese people and see how that goes, and see what kind of, see if it is successful or not, and see if I can actually do it. And then, of course, trying to do more things with Japanese television. It's something I really like doing. I've done lots of radio shows here, and I've done some TV things, both in Japan and in America, but just more of all that stuff, and just integrating it more into being a professional performer and move it to the next level of my career.
Awesome. And then I guess this is the last thing I'd love to hear your opinion on is, so in Japan, I imagine a lot of people are going to kind of put you into this box of foreigner who plays shakuhachi. And so do you feel like you're pretty okay with that, and you're going to try to take advantage of that to reach an even greater audience? Or do you really just want them to view you as a shakuhachi player and not really take into account the fact that you're not ethnically Japanese?
So I'm going to give you a long-winded answer, and because I think it's important. When the 50s and 60s hit, there was actually a huge influx of Chinese and Japanese string players playing Western classical music. And the thing is that they were really, really good, and they started winning jobs. And so what the Americans did, and a lot of Europeans did, actually mostly Europeans did, is they said, oh, they don't actually know what they're doing. They're just copying what we've done. So they're just a copy. So that they had like a separate view of an Asian musician, right? They had like, the Asian musicians are just the copy paste musicians. And so what I'm experiencing right now is sort of the same thing in just reverse. Like, they just view me as like, oh, well, he probably is just copying his teacher, or he's probably just copying the recordings, or he doesn't really understand the music, or something like that. But then where their opinions start to change a little bit is when I start to talk about the music, like from an American's perspective, and especially when I start speaking about Japanese aestheticism, and beyond just like ma wabi sabi and mono no aware, which is like place, the veil of antiquity, and the fleeting nature of existence. When I go even deeper and even past all those things, and then I start to talk about concepts that they haven't heard about before, or if I start talking about old Buddhist concepts, like esoteric things, that are not even necessarily Japanese, but more Indian and Chinese, then they go, oh, maybe he actually does understand this. Maybe he actually feels this in a way that I don't, because I don't know these sort of things, because it's not like it's necessarily inherently Japanese. And like I don't really even view music as inherently something that we can own. You know, like we call it Western music, but like Westerners don't own it. Everybody in the world enjoys Beethoven. And that's sort of the thing that I'm trying to break, is that Japanese music isn't just for Japanese people. It's for everybody. It's for the world. And I've already gotten lots of kickback from that, but not from Japanese. I've gotten a lot of kickback from that in America.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying that even if initially they try to put you into this box of a foreigner who's just copying, and so they're not taking you that seriously, you can use your actual knowledge and skill to show them otherwise. But are you okay with the fact that at the very beginning they are going to look at you as a foreigner, and maybe that might even be advantageous in terms of reaching a bigger audience, because there's that initial interest factor, right? Of, you know, oh, a foreigner plays Shakuhachi.
It's actually an interesting point, and this is something that we asked ourselves very often in composition, because we would be writing our own music, and sometimes like composers write really weird stuff, and we have to ask ourselves, do we actually care what the audience thinks? And like, in a sense, like, yeah, of course I care. I hope they're enjoying themselves. Like, I don't want them to feel like they're wasting their money when they come here. But you know, if they have that sort of opinion, like it doesn't faze me any other way. They're still digesting this music. They're still digesting Shakuhachi, and that's what's most important to me, because I want like Shakuhachi to be a household name, because it's like, for me, I have never had anything in my life that I've had so much burning passion for. Like, my belly is on fire all the time, because like when I wake up, it's like, oh man, so what am I going to do today to further my skill, my career, and my life as a shakuhachi player? And whether it be, you know, making a stupid YouTube video where I play anime music for people on Omegle, or whether it be some really in-depth book study and, you know, going deeper into some sort of aesthetic that's still not that clear for me. Because this sort of thing, like music, language, there's always this kind of a question that gets asked by learners, but people who want to start. How long will it take me to get to be a master? How long will it take me to get fluent? Well, even if you live in Japan and you are a Japanese native, you still have to learn new words, because language changes. So you're always learning new things no matter what. And, you know, it's really funny, because older generation people in America, when they listen to kids speak, they have no idea what they're saying because so much of the words are so different from them. And that happens in Japan. It happens in Japan so much too. The older generation has no idea what the younger generation is saying sometimes, because it changes. So every single day is just a new opportunity to try to stay up to date with everything that's happening, and also to hone in my skill the best I can.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's really inspiring. I'm inspired to just hear that about people like you who are so dedicated and living their life in such a meaningful way every day.
Yeah, so and I will have to say, I am so jealous of your Japanese level. Really, it's just like blows me away. And my girlfriend and I keep watching the videos, and I'm like, how? Like, and then at one point we'll get like, there's one mistake after like 25 minutes. So bravo to you. It's really something, quite an amazing accomplishment that you've done.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm jealous to you that you were learning shakuhachi as you were learning Japanese. I was just watching anime. So now I have Japanese ability. I don't have any cool skill I can show off with it. So, you know, the grass is always greener on the other side.
No, that's very true.
Cool. Yeah, well, thanks so much for coming on. And yeah, everyone definitely check out Shawn's channel. And I'm sure we'll collab again in the future.
Oh, I hope so.
Cool. See you guys.